When are we not going to start?
I don't know if it will ever get easier. All right, should we kick off the episode with our mindful breath?
Yes, please.
Yeah, so wherever you are, take a nice slow breath in through your nose and just a gentle and relaxed breath out. Before we start this episode, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we're recording today, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, the same land in which I've always had the privilege of calling home. I extend my deepest respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, always was and always will be Aboriginal land. All right, Megzy, how are you?
I'm really good. I'm feeling back to a nice, healthy energy. Had some good sleeps over the last few nights, which obviously makes a massive difference. So yeah, I'm really, really feeling good, and the sun's out, and that always makes such a difference, doesn't it? It's obviously still a bit cold, but I don't know. I'm such a sun worshipper, and I really notice how much of a difference it makes when the sun is shining to my energy.
To lifting that seasonal depression.
Literally. How are you?
Yeah, I'm not bad. Not bad. How am I? Yeah.
Okay, that didn't sound very convincing. Are you okay, actually?
No, I'm actually great. It's really nice to be here with you always. Yeah, I'm actually really looking forward to the conversation that we're going to have today. So that feels like where all of my mental energy is in this moment. I can't remember how I am because I'm just excited to chat to you.
Can I just say one thing though, just off the back of you just mentioning that? And it's funny because I think that we're obviously, pre-recording these episodes, which we've touched on before. So we're in this point where we've had quite a few conversations now, but there aren't that many episodes out in the world yet.
True.
By the time you hear this, there will have been, obviously, but for us in this very moment, there aren't that many, right? And you and I were texting last night, and I said to you, shit, for some reason I've just had this moment where it's dawned on me that we are having these conversations really publicly.
Yes.
We're on a podcast. We have these conversations all the time. Like you and I, friends, in your close-knit circles, you talk about things that are close to home that, I'm always quite a vulnerable person, and I'm usually a pretty open book, but I've never been this open with strangers.
Well, yeah. And isn't it true that with other platforms that you can be a little bit selective? Like, for example, you can block someone from your Instagram stories, or you can put yourself on private if you want to. Whereas I feel like with this, it's like there's no control. Yeah. Anyone can tune into this. And I've had a few people who, old friends or family members who are like, I listened to the podcast. I'm like, oh, no. Don't you listen. You're not allowed to listen.
I know. Even yesterday, my mum, bless, she's pretty old school.
Yeah.
Isn't really up with technology and all that kind of thing. And so I was sort of explaining to her how the podcast land works. But she has recently just downloaded Spotify on her phone. So I'm like, you can go onto Spotify if you want to, type in Rushing Slowly. And then I was like, oh shit, but that means my mum's going to be listening to these conversations. Actually.
Love you, mum. Yeah. And I was also, because as you said, there's not that many episodes live in the world yet. And those first kind of DMs that started to roll in around people like, I've listened. I think I had a vulnerability hangover, that feeling where you're like, oh God, a little bit contracted, oh God, did I regret, did I say something that I wish I hadn't have? But then actually just remembering like the reason why we're doing this, which is just to encourage open, honest conversations. And even with the few conversations I think we've both had so far, like it's so nice to connect with people. So even though it feels a little bit scary, I know that it will get easier, hopefully.
Yeah, and that's it. And that's like going back to what you said at the start. It's like when do we ever get to the point where we start an episode without like giggling and being awkward and weird? And I guess we'll get there. But I agree. I think that you've said this before. It's a quote that you've said, but you know, it's now I'm going to butcher it, but it's like we're stronger together, basically.
Yeah.
And I just think it's been
well,
real.
this is a judgment-free space. Let's all agree. So, okay, let's kick off. I'm really interested in what's keeping you rushing at the moment.
Well, for me at the moment, it is preparing for event season. It's coming towards the end of the footy season. And so with that comes a lot of events, events that you need to do your hair for and think about what to wear. And that is really outside of my realm. I still think I'm a teenage boy, really. Like I'm not really the overly girly girl type when it comes to getting dolled up and the glam and all that stuff. It still feels very unnatural to me. And I think it always will. And I think that that's a big part of, you know, me growing up as a little bush rat in the territory. Like I don't often wear shoes, and brushing my hair is, you know, a monthly, it's brushed today, but I probably won't brush it again for a month. So I'm very lucky that I get to attend the Brownlow, which still feels ridiculous to me. I'm like, what? Because that's always been something that I've grown up watching. That's one of the main events on telly that I always watch. I actually remember my year 12 formal. The dress that I picked to wear to my year 12 formal was inspired by that red dress. I don't know if you remember it, but by that red dress that Beck Judd wore. It was like this backless dress.
Yeah.
And year 12, like I was 17 or 18 or something. So I remember just like, you know, watching, I've always watched that red carpet Brownlow moment forever. And so it still feels very pinch me to be able to be invited to things like that. And it feels very weird for me. I'm like, you know, this little Darwin kid. But anyway, very, very excited to be, you know, attending things like that. But the having to think about what to wear and what to all of that stuff, I'm just like, can't I just go in my Nikes, my sneaks?
No, you can't.
So anyway, yeah, lots of fun, lots of best and fairest events coming up, and then of course we go into spring racing stuff, which is really exciting. So yeah, lots of things to think about, lots of dresses and frocks and all the lot. But anyway, very, very privileged to be able to experience all these fun things. We live in such an event city.
Yeah.
So yes. What about you?
What's keeping me rushing? Yeah, so many things always, but at the moment we are pondering where we want to live, which is no small pondering. So
this is massive.
It's huge actually. So for anyone who doesn't know, my husband and I, we live on the peninsula down the coast, and where we've like classic COVID move. I think we moved down there maybe in 2020 when we went into our first lockdown, because my mum lives down there. And then we decided to stay because we loved it so much. But now, of course, we're out of lockdown and the context has changed, and Guy works in the city and I work a lot in the city, and yeah, we just spend a lot of time in the car. But it's this real battle at the moment of, oh gosh, like what do we really value? What do we really want? Like, yeah, and that's really tricky. So anyway, at the moment we're looking at our options and looking at rental properties and just trying to figure out what that looks like. But the mental load of that is massive, because when you've got a busy schedule and then also throwing in a move, which I think they say moving house is one of like the major life stresses. It's a lot. So that's what's keeping me rushing.
You looked at a property. You were texting yesterday and you're like, what are you doing? Are you home? Guy wants to catch up. And I'm like, huh? I'm out. Because you were going to look at a property on the street that I live in.
Yes.
Which would have been absolutely perfect. I would have
been dangerous.
Yeah, would have literally never left your house.
Yeah, but no, that one didn't work out, unfortunately, although it would have been stunning to live so close to each other. But no, that was absolutely not an option.
And can I just touch on the living situation and the fact that you've made this step, I think is massive, because it's been something, like you said, that the decision making of do we stay or do we go has been a topic of conversation that we've gone back and forth on for so long. I feel like we went on a trip somewhere towards the end of last year, and you were, I can't remember where we went, but you were talking about it then.
I think it was Sydney. I think we were on the plane to Sydney. We were talking about it. Yeah, it's been back and forth, and that's. Like, I struggle with decision making at the best of times. I can't even decide what I want to have for dinner, let alone such a big decision like this one. And when you write out the pros and cons list, like, it's so equal. So many pros, so like with everything, right? With everything, there's pros and cons. So this decision has felt really, really hard. And we haven't made a final decision. Like, there are lots of contributing factors to where we'll end up, because, you know, really essentially finding the right house will be the first important thing. But yeah, so we'll see. But we figure it's one thing to have an idea of moving. It's another thing to start putting it into reality. So that's why we're like looking at houses and just kind of really putting our feet in what it would look and feel like, so that it's not just an idea in our head anymore, and hoping that will help to keep giving more clarity.
100%. And I think it's like that universal thing. It's like, as soon as you flick on that universal radar, sometimes it responds. It's like, okay, I'm ready. I've made this decision. And so I think now you've flicked that switch, and let's watch the
universe, please.
Yeah, let's watch the
please
options roll in. More on Beach App, please.
Yeah. Anyway, watch this space, you guys, because anything could happen at this point. But let's get into what we're talking about today. So you have generously offered to share with me and with our listeners some of your experience with psoriasis. So that's sort of the focus of today. And of course, kind of tying that into body image and how your experience of psoriasis impacts your relationship with yourself and your appearance. So, let's kick off there.
Okay. So psoriasis. Yeah.
Maybe let's start by just explaining what psoriasis is for anyone who doesn't know.
Yeah. So psoriasis is an autoimmune condition that results in your body essentially overproducing cells. So you're overproducing white blood cells, which mistakenly attack your skin cells. So what tends to happen is, because it's like such a rapid skin production process, you tend to get these lesions all over your skin, basically. So your skin cells are in overdrive, and it presents in this like red, itchy, scaly, plaquey skin condition.
Is it like dry skin, or does it feel different? Really dry.
Dry and flaky and just so uncomfortable. So,
and itchy, or not so much?
Sometimes itchy, like I was never so much, my scalp used to get really itchy. And I think the reason that my scalp used to get so itchy is because it's an area that's a lot harder to hydrate.
True.
Like if you were hydrating, like and I still am, I'm like a psychotic when it comes to moisturizing, because I am quite dry anyway, and so add the psoriasis on top. So I would find that my body would not be quite as itchy because I would keep myself ridiculously moisturized, but because it's a little bit harder to moisturize your scalp, my scalp would be like red raw because it would be so itchy.
Ouch.
So I think firstly, I just want to say to anyone who is battling with an autoimmune condition or a skin condition, psoriasis, eczema, acne, anything that affects the way that you appear and your confidence, because ultimately that's what it strips you of. I love you and I feel you and you're beautiful and I'm sorry that you're going through this because it's awful.
Yeah. Yeah. So maybe let's go back in time and I'd love to know when this started for you and what was happening around that time of your life, and I guess what you attribute psoriasis to, like where did it stem from?
Yeah, so growing up, I had never any issues whatsoever. It was never a case of it being something that I was kind of born with and I've dealt with my whole life. It was certainly something that came on later in life. And I think for me, I mean, there are quite a lot of triggers and no one can really ever fully pinpoint exactly like this is what causes it, because there's just it's very individual. I think for lots of people it's different, but it's very commonly known that stress is a major factor, lifestyle, alcohol, smoking, diet, there's lots of things, inflammation in the gut. And for me, I think it was definitely stress, really, that was where it really began. And to take it back would have been, so I would have been diagnosed with it for the first time, I would say now maybe about 12 years ago. I remember it was when I first moved to Melbourne and I moved into a little apartment, a little townhouse in Richmond, and I moved with a boyfriend at the time. It was like the first time that I'd ever lived with a boyfriend, and we didn't have a very healthy relationship at that point. You know, you're kind of young and I was very riddled with, you know, insecurity and trust and, you know, so I was like, you know, all those things were going on in my life in the background. I also had braces put on. So I got like adult braces. I think I was 21 when I got braces. And I'd also at that point just was not very confident in my skin. This is before psoriasis and having a boyfriend that at that time that I felt like I was probably a little bit inadequate, and I, you know, then adding the braces on top of that, and I just felt like I wasn't good enough for him. And then on top of that, we had a lot of trust issues, and on top of that, it's the stress of like, you know, living in your first property and all of those things. And then to pile onto that, my dad was sick. My dad had cancer. He passed away with a terminal illness. He died of cancer 10 years ago. But at that point, he was in the thick of treatment. And so it was just a lot of stress, heaps going on. And I started to notice these little sores on my skin. It started on my belly and it was very minimal to begin with. And it just wouldn't go away. I was like kind of treating it. I'd just go into the chemist and get creams from behind the counter that they'd recommend, and wasn't sort of going away. And if anything, it was getting worse. So went to different doctors, had a biopsy, and was diagnosed that it was psoriasis. And it started very minimally, but over time, especially with the way that life kind of compounded, you know, that relationship only kind of got worse, and my dad's illness got worse, and then he passed away, and then I just went down this path of being very reckless with the way that I was managing all of the emotional baggage that I was carrying from that time. And really, instead of taking care of myself and noticing that I needed to, you know, slow down and probably seek help and, you know, heal from the ache of, you know, losing my dad. And that's a whole conversation for another time. But instead, I partied like crazy, like I was out every weekend, really like kind of having massive weekends that rolled into the next mornings, the next days, and then working, like beginning my studies and trying to, you know, work in this fitness industry and early starts. And I was just really lost. Like I just was really, really lost. And Obviously not taking care of my health meant that my condition was only worsening. And because I was in a really vicious cycle with like the partying, I was like constantly up and down in my mind, and just riddled with stress and riddled with like toxic mindset. And my condition, of course, was just going to get worse while I was in that cycle. And it's like I remember speaking to a health coach and them saying to me, you know, you had all this stuff going on inside you, not only internally in your gut. Like our gut is actually as important as our brain. It controls so much. And so, you know, I've got all this stuff happening in my gut, all this stuff happening in my mind, to the point that like it had to come out somewhere, and it came out through my skin. And I remember her saying that, and I was like, shit. And it made me really visualize. Like that's where I became really into visualization. And I remember like visualizing what my gut must have looked like in that time. And I was just like, to me, it just looked like a wound, like a wound that was just raw and so unhappy and unsettled. And once I could start to picture that, I was like, oh shit, like I need to take better care of myself. But it took me a long time to get to the point that I recognized that I needed to do some serious work to get myself out of that hole.
Right. And so you've just moved to Melbourne, which is also massive, because that was the first time that you lived in Melbourne as well? Or?
First time I lived in Melbourne. I did live over in the UK for a couple of years in my so I moved over to the UK when I was 20 to 23.
Yeah.
22, came here when I was 23.
Yeah, yeah. So you moved to Melbourne, you're in a relationship that is a little bit tumultuous and sounds kind of stressful, and then you lose your dad. They're like three massive components. And so I guess what you're saying is that your sense of where that psoriasis came from was the emotional expression of some of those things that perhaps you were just burying away through partying and distracting yourself and everything in between.
100%.
Yeah. But then obviously something shifted. You start to bring in visualization and starting to recognize, oh, wow, maybe this is a result of something. It's not coming from nowhere. So what happens next?
So I go through that cycle that you've just described there for an extended period of time. So I repeat and recycle those patterns and behaviors probably for a good couple of years, I would say. You know, getting in parallel to the partying and the numbing, I also got my personal training qualifications and landed in the fitness industry. So I'm like really driven by this idea of health. You know, watching someone like your dad deteriorate to a terminal illness is a massive driver. And so it was like this weird double-edged sword in my mind of like, I really want to take care of my health. And that's why I was like, okay, I want to pursue a career in the fitness and health industry. So I studied and I did that, but on the side, still not knowing how to navigate the pain and of my dad, but also relationships and other little things that had happened along the way. And so without knowing how to, without having any tools, I would say, at that point, I just didn't have a toolkit whatsoever. My toolkit at that point was just numb. Yeah. And because I really value fun and I like socializing, and I'm lucky that, got lots of fun mates. And so the numbing, if it kind of worked in that it was like I was having fun at least, even though it was to the detriment of like my soul and my well-being. But I've repeated that for a period of time to the point that it must have been about 2019, I think. And my dad died in 2014. So, yeah, it was a good couple of years. And, gosh, I went through 2018 was a year for me. It was like that year. I don't know if you would be familiar with this. I'm not sure if our listeners would be, but Saturn returns.
Oh, yeah, baby. To the best of my knowledge, I might not get this totally right, but your Saturn return, I believe that it takes Saturn 29 years to rotate around the sun through the 12 zodiac signs. So it said that at the age of 29, Saturn is back in its original place that it was when you were born, and therefore that is a or can be a time of like real growth and change. And for many, many people, myself included, and I think that there's different lengths that your Saturn return can last for depending on your star sign or something. So for some people it can last for the whole year. For some people it's like a specific month. I think you can, if people are interested, you can like jump on Google and figure out when your Saturn return is. But yeah, it's said that during that time, and a lot of people have the experience of a lot of change. And according to Amy's just done the research, and if you are born between 1994 and 1996, you are currently in your Saturn return.
Thank you, Google.
For anyone listening.
And Ames.
Yeah. But, and Amy, who is obviously in her Saturn return right now and looking at us with devil eyes.
She's like, I get it.
Uh-oh.
So, 2018, it bent me over and really, really did me a dirty. Mm-hmm. And so come 2019, I am in turmoil. Right. Like my whole soul, spirit, body, mind, everything is just like a prune. Like my energy, my heart is just aching. My chest is like ripped apart with anxiety. Like I was in the worst place ever. It actually, it's like actually makes me emotional. I had no idea I was going to cry, but it does. Like to think back to that time was awful. And naturally when you're in that place, my skin, my psoriasis just went through the roof. Like I just remember laying in my bed and just crying every day for months. Whoa. Yeah, like I just remember crying. And I had like completely and utterly covered myself from the top of my head to the bottom of my toes. Like I had these skin lesions everywhere, in my bum, on my whole body. It was just awful. And it was just so uncomfortable. Even to just go to Coles to do my shopping, I felt so insecure. It just felt like I just felt like I was, what's that? Hunchback of Notre Dame. I was like, I'm just this gross, disgusting being, and everyone is looking at me and judging me, and I just feel so ugly. And I remember looking in the mirror and just being like, you are gross every day, like just thinking the worst thoughts, and my head was in the bin. Like it was this just cycle of negative self-loathing, self-deprecating, just horrific thoughts about myself that I was having. And so there was like a rock bottom moment, really, like massively rock bottom moment for me, to the point that like my mum had to come down, and like my mum was here, and I remember her taking me to the dermatologist, and we really were like, we need to do something about this because it is not good. Started really I was like, I cannot feel like this anymore. I can't feel like this forever. I can't keep doing this to my body. I can't keep burning the candle at both ends and, numbing my pain with alcohol and just not healing. Like I have to face the demons here and just fix myself. Otherwise I'm going to just get worse and worse and worse and be in this hole forever. And so that was the turning point, really.
Yeah. Can I just, before you go on, what if you were to summarize that feeling, like that feeling that you were experiencing during that time that I can see like comes alive in you now, even as you reflect on it, what would it be?
It felt like hell.
Wow.
Like it honestly felt like hell. Like it was like raging negativity.
Wow.
Raging. And it was just you know, and because I'm quite a positive person and I've got a relatively strong mindset, but when your self-worth is so challenged, because, you know, the first thing people see when they look at you is your appearance, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I know I'm a good person and I know I've got a good heart, and I know I know I know that, and I know that deep down. But when your appearance is impacted, and that's such a big part of what people judge you on, it just completely rattled me, and yeah, the negative thoughts that were in my mind were beyond. Like, I had it was some of the deepest, darkest, scariest thoughts that I've ever had in my life during that particular period, and it was awful. Very sad emotionally, very, very, very sad.
The thing that strikes me as really challenging is what you mentioned. You know, you see your dad going through this physical illness that's terminal, and that showing to you this appreciation for your own health and a desire to like really want to take care of yourself. But then the paradox of actually not having the tools to take care of yourself emotionally through his loss, and then through the condition in your skin, and just how challenging that must have been to actually know deep down how much you value your health, but simultaneously be kind of wrecking yourself in the process of trying to cope.
And it was exactly that, literally having no concept of what to do. Like, I had nothing in the toolkit really at that point. Like, I've always been a very gratitude orientated person, and journaling's always formed a big part of what I've done for a long time. But in terms of the robustness of my toolkit now, I had not much going on at that point. And it was that hitting rock bottom moment, that deep, dark period that I went through, and recognizing, fuck this, I don't want to stay here anymore, because it ain't it. Like, this ain't life. If I'm and fortunately I have a great support network, and like my mum, she's an angel, and like beautiful mates and all of that stuff. So like, you know, I'm very fortunate in that sense, and also fortunate enough to have an awareness of mindset, and knowing that like, okay, I really believe in the power of, if I learn to change my mindset, and if I start working actively on myself and, you know, really putting in work, like, you're not going to just heal like a wound, an infection. If you cut your leg open, or if you have a car accident or whatever, like, it doesn't just click its finger and it just heals itself. You have to work. You got to go to the doctors. You got to do rehab. You got to treat it. You got to put bandages on it. It's just the same with your mind. And I knew that, and I'm very grateful that I at least had that awareness to go, I know I can change my situation here, but I just actually need to work and do it.
Yeah. Well, and then it sounds as though your mum comes down, you see a dermatologist, and then everything starts to change.
Yeah, so big like journey. But yeah, mum comes down, start seeing a dermatologist, start getting on these all different sorts of medications, trialing and error, testing and trialing different things, and it's a big trial and error process. Like, you know, initially you start your treatments with like oral tablets, and then they give you different sorts of steroid creams, and I'm doing light therapy 3 times a week, and going into my dermatologist to use a light therapy bed, and I'm fucking getting my housemate to spray me while I'm basically stark as naked every single night with this spray. Like, thankfully I've always lived with such beautiful friends, but yeah, like, these are just vivid memories that I have of like going and knocking on Portia's door, or at a period I lived with my girlfriend Laura as well, and like every night outside, we're in the cold, they're like spraying me down with this it's called Instiller spray. Yeah, just full on treatment from a from a dermatological perspective. Is that the right word? I don't know. But anyway, let's run with that. And then on top of that, you know, I'm also very cognizant of what's required to start addressing this grey cloud in my mind, because you can do all of these treatments in the world, but if you're not working to heal from the internal perspective, both mentally but also actually in terms of a physical health space as well. So I started working with a psychologist on the mental health plan. I also started seeing a kinesiologist, which was really interesting. I got so much out of that, and I reckon I must have done about 5 or 6 sessions back to back over the course of every couple of weeks with Ruby, who was my kinesiologist at the time. And what that is basically it's quite a spiritual practice where they use this tapping technique, which of course you obviously know about, but for those of you that aren't familiar with kinesiology, she would get me in, we would have a bit of a one-on-one conversation, kind of just gauging what I wanted to get out of that session. And then we'd lay on the bed and then she'd do all of this like tapping stuff on my body. And I just find this stuff so fascinating. Like I'm very open to this space, like spiritual healing. And some of the shit that came up in these kinesiology sessions was wild. Like taking me back to, because what it does is it's like, she's like, what is something that happened to you at the age of 7? And I'm like, I don't know. But, she really gets you. It's like very thought-provoking and she's like, this is coming up and I'm seeing this. And then she's tapping me and she's like, what happened to you when you were 14 in this month? And I'm like, what? And it really takes you back to this like inner child, a lot of like realizing your conditioned behaviors through this practice. Very fascinating. Got so much out of kinesiology. Often I'd walk out of these sessions and be a puddle. Like I'd go in there none the wiser and come out an absolute puddle because I'm like, I'm not thinking about what happened in my life 18, 20 years ago and how that's impacting me today, but it does. We store everything inside. It doesn't just go away. So that was huge for me, being able to go back and really unpack a lot of stuff that, that we as humans we just sweep away and move forward and don't process. So it was a real like processing a lot of stagnant and stuck emotion in the body through these practices. I was always doing a decent chunk of breath work as well, which obviously is a massive passion of mine. This was all like in conjunction with each other. So it was absolutely sending me broke, all of this stuff. But I was like, I just need to do it.
Yeah.
I was getting acupuncture when I was in the thick of like my whole body being covered, my face being red raw, my clumps of hair falling out. I was going to acupuncture as well every couple of weeks alongside, all of the medications, and 3 times a week going to my dermatologist for light therapy. Like it was literally like a full-time job. And then on top of that, just doing my own practices that I knew really helped me. So journaling, massive one. And I remember something that like really got me through that period in terms of the mindset shifting stuff with the journaling. I would write to myself in my journal things like, Dear Megzy, remember what you did for that person and how much they appreciated. Do you, again, why am I so, like this is, such a sook, geez, but it was like a real teaching myself to love myself process with the journaling. I'd be like, Dear Megzy, you are beautiful. Like you're actually beautiful. You're so loved. Like remember that time when this person told you how special you were. Like you are loved, you're enough, you're beautiful, you're a legend, you're fun. Like, and I would write myself these letters, like deep letters, and that was a big part of the mindset shift stuff. And that actually I would say probably was one of the biggest things that helped me, because you spend so much time in the negative, and you forget about those things. So, and you're not saying that out loud. No, you're not telling anyone that. I'm never ever speaking about myself like that publicly. But through the practice of writing, it enables you to just get a little deeper with yourself. And that was the only way, that was the only time in my life for that period of a couple of years where I was speaking positively to myself, because every other time it was like, you are the most unlovable, most ugly, gross chick in the world. Like that's all I thought about myself.
Wow. Can I ask on that? I mean, firstly, I'm so grateful in you sharing this, and I can see that actually it can be a little bit hard to reflect on now, because obviously it was, as you said, was like hell, and that's a lot. So you're not a sook. But obviously what you just mentioned there around some part of you believing that you're the ugliest, grossest girl in the world, even though another part of you knew that that wasn't true, because deep down you understand that you're a good person, and it sounds like being able to write yourself letters in that tone of voice was incredibly impactful. But that part of you who did believe that she was gross, what do you think that part of you needed to hear most when you were in the depths of what you describe as hell?
That you're loved. You are so loved. Even though I knew I was, like I knew I was loved by my mum and by my nearest and dearest, but she did not feel like she was worthy of being loved by anyone else. And I really struggled to love myself. And I found it like relationships were almost unattainable for me at that point, because how can you allow somebody to love you when you don't love yourself? And in saying that, I did have relationships at that time, and you know, I reflect on that a lot too, because I just think, oh gosh, like I was the worst possible version of myself at that point. And I was in a couple of relationships, especially in 2018. I was dating this guy who like loved me so much, and he was showing me so much love, but I just rejected it so much. And I did everything possible to sabotage it because I couldn't love myself. And I reflect like, yeah, and that relationship forms a massive part of the Saturn returns for me. And I won't go into it now because it's really quite personal and very deep, but it ended really, really, really badly. And you know, at the time, yeah, obviously super heartbroken and stuff, but now I look back on that and I go, fuck, I often send that person a lot of love through my thoughts, because I'm like, I've just appreciated how much he was trying to make things work, but I was just shutting it down because I was like, I am not lovable. How can you even love? Like, how do you love me? Like, I'm disgusting. And that was what it was. So yeah, the biggest thing that she needed then in that moment was love. But not from anyone else, from myself.
Yeah. And I just like the closest thing that I can, like I have not had an experience like this. So of course it's impossible for me to put myself in your shoes, but the closest thing that I can relate to personally is the experience of having acne. Like I went through a period of my life where I had severe acne, which I think most people do, right? It's a part of puberty and evolving. But when there is something so visible that is, as you said, the first thing that someone sees when you meet them or when you see them, it is so hard to not expect that person to be totally judging you. But then interestingly, if I reflect on moments where perhaps I've come into contact with someone who potentially has something on their skin or acne, actually I'm not judging at all. Firstly, I feel compassion because actually I know what it's like to feel self-conscious. But also I just feel a sense of kind of love and welcomeness because they're a human being, and actually I'm not really interested in what they look like. I'm interested in who they are.
That's such a good point, and I resonate with that so much because I'm exactly the same. Like never, ever, ever once in my experience of an encounter with somebody else who might present with, you know, whatever it might be, a skin whatever, I am never, ever looking at them and thinking anything of those sorts.
And especially not, oh, that person's less than me.
Yeah.
And I think we tend to think when we are the one who has something that we're judging ourselves for, it's like, I feel less than other people.
Yep.
But that's often not the case.
And it is such a nice reminder, and that was a big part of it as well. It was like I had to consciously remind myself of that all the time. The only person that is judging me is me.
Yeah.
And again, a huge part of the mindset shift, a huge part of what happened in my journal. God, my journal's like far out. I can't wait till I'm like in my 80s and I read back over all of these journals that I've kept over the years. But another big part of what helped me is affirmations as well. So, you know, like I said, a lot of the time I would wake up in the morning, I'd get in the shower, I'd be putting my cream on, and my skin and my face and my head would be red raw, and I'd have all of these like flaky, just gross things on my face that were gross to me. And I would see myself in the mirror and I'd be like, you're disgusting, you're gross. And so that was another thing where I was like, okay, I have to change this. I have to catch myself out here. And so for a long period of time, I reckon I did this every day for maybe like 6 weeks. I would stand in the mirror in my bathroom every single morning, the same mirror that I would stand in before doing this and see myself as just yuck, and instead go, I am beautiful, out loud. I'm beautiful. I'm enough. I'm pretty. I'm gorgeous. I'm fun. I'm lovable. I'm lovable. Like, I am lovable. I'm enough. I'm enough. I'm enough. Over and over and over again every day. Like, every day I did that. And it helped. It definitely helped. And, you know, then that all of those things in conjunction, the psychologist, the dermatologist, the kinesiologist, the acupuncture, the practices, the mindfulness toolkit, building it out. And from that period, like, that's where I've really built this robust kit of like tools now that I lean into and that help me when I, catch myself in these negative thought patterns. But during that time was where it was all built. And, I really had to pour time and love into myself. And, thankfully, but not thankfully, a big part of my healing was during COVID. Like, I was still going through the thick of all of this skin stuff then, but I had a lot more time to be at home to like lather myself in coconut oil and like make hair masks and do all of this stuff. So very fortunate that was part of it for me. And it was a really long process to the point that, now I haven't had a flare up for, I reckon, almost a year and a half.
Wow.
Yeah. And I personally have got to the point where, and this was something that I really, really questioned and did my own due diligence, and this is my story, and I don't, everyone else is different, but now I have injections.
Sure.
So that certainly plays part of, helping keep it at bay. So every 12 weeks I inject I get Portia to inject me because I'm not very good at doing it, but she does 2 little injections in my tummy. And that was kind of like the last attempt in terms of the medical side to help me, because you have to, in order to be considered to be able to actually be able to have these injections, you have had to have failed every other treatment, which of course I did. And so that kind of was like my final trial. And so far so good. And that is a big part of what's helping, but also I'm in a very different place now to then. Like I've got this toolkit, I practice breath work, I value myself a lot more, I am just in a much healthier mindset. Obviously the skin condition being at bay really plays a part in that. Like, it changes everything. And so now when people say to me, like, I think because I've gone through the ring with my skin and like gone through the ring with my self-esteem and my self-confidence, now to hear somebody say to me like, oh, and especially because so many people knew that too. Like, a lot of the people in my networks, like even random people, like because I've always worked in the fitness industry, I often see people and they're like, Megzy, your skin's looking so good, because they would see me when it wasn't good. And so that to me is like the biggest compliment in the world, that like I've got to the other side of it. And, it's still a work in progress, and it still costs an arm and a leg sometimes to maintain all of these treatments and whatnot. But it is what it is. You just got to kind of go with it and do whatever you can to kind of help. But yeah, I feel like I'm in a really good place with it now. And it's nice to sit here and reflect on it because, you know, naturally, of course, it's going to make me a little bit emotional because I was emotional for like years because of it. And it brings up so much like that self-worth and self-esteem stuff. Like when I think about how poor my self-worth was, and it's still a work in progress, like I am by no means perfect in any way, shape or form or even near it in terms of having a healthy self-worth. But it's from where it was to where it is now is like I'm like a whole different human. And so I get it. Like I've been there and I feel like, you know, that's why having these conversations, it means so much because it's like, you know, we're not alone. And I used to think for so long in that time that I was alone, but you're not.
Yeah. Well, even just in your ability with me and with us in this moment actually to express emotion and to acknowledge the emotion still tied to this, I guess really is a signal of growth because I guess one of the main problems
Sorry.
I guess one of the main issues back then was actually an unwillingness to be able to sit in the sadness and the emotion of all of the movement and all of the grief in your life. And yeah, I mean, it's really clear to me how much work you've put into yourself and you should be so proud of that because actually that's one of the hardest things a human can do. And yeah.
Thank you. It is hard, but it's worth it. You know, like again, this bit of a cliche one, but life is short, very actually. And as two people that sit here have lost very significant figures in our lives, in our dads, that's my biggest lesson out of all of that, that this life is it's not forever. It's very short in the grand scheme of time. And we have one opportunity to make the most of it and live it fully and have a healthy mindset as best as we can and love people deeply and love ourselves deeply and have fun and experience things in lightness. Yeah. And that is the mindset that I choose to take now because I don't want to look back and think, oh, fuck, like I could have done more or I wish that I felt better. And fortunately, I've always known that I've got the ability to manipulate my mindset to see things differently if I work at it.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. I mean, there's obviously so much more to cover, particularly around self-image and body image and self-worth. But I guess these are all the kinds of things that we're going to continue tackling on Rushing Slowly because I think when we boil it down for so many of us, the thing that really does keep us rushing is feeling as though we're not enough and that we need more and we need to be more. And so again, I'm so grateful for your openness and sharing this with me and with our listeners. And I'm sure that there's more for us to come back to and explore. But with all of that in mind, remembering that life is short and we only get one of them, what is helping you to slow down at the moment?
Well, actually, this is a relatively new little, just a new little splash of sleep hygiene that I've been enjoying recently. Rain music, actually, while I sleep was introduced to me recently. And I've been finding how it's so nice. I've got this, I can actually link the playlist that I listen to into the show notes perhaps.
Please.
But I've been sleeping with rain music on and it's honestly heaven. So I've been put this playlist on and then I put my phone like far away from like my bed, almost so it's like not on my windowsill but far enough away that it actually feels like it is raining outside.
Beautiful.
Wow. And I think as somebody growing up in the territory and rain, like sleeping through like hectic rain and thunderstorms, it's so calming. And so, when I've been struggling to sleep or if my mind's been really, really active at night, so I chuck this rain music playlist on and I'm out like a light.
Oh, Amazing.
Love it.
Yeah, I love that. There's nothing more soothing than the sound of rain.
Oh, it's the most beautiful, like the little trickle and pitter patter. It sounds like just rain constantly at your window.
Does it stay on all night?
All night. Plays all night.
So in the morning you wake up and it's still going?
Yeah. Or unless I've like got up to go to the bathroom during the night, I might flick it off and just go back to sleep. But yeah, there have been some morning, it just goes right through. It's like a 14-hour playlist. So I'll put it in the show notes.
Amazing.
What about you, my love? What is it right in this very moment that's helping you to slow down a bit?
Yeah. So, I mean, the week that's just passed has been crazy busy as per every other week. And yeah, I've been doing my best just to find little pockets of time where I can slow down. And I did make a commitment to myself this week, which I don't usually do, but off the back of a client cancelling, rather than filling their session immediately, sometimes I'll actually just use that as my opportunity to kind of slow things down, which is really challenging, right? I guess it comes down to this really fine balance between taking care of myself and taking care of my clients. I only have a certain amount of hours in the week, and so that can be really tricky with scheduling, and sometimes that means that I work a little more than I would like to, and sometimes as a result of that, that means I need to take the opportunity to work just a little bit less if and when I can. So that was the week that's just passed, rather than rescheduling immediately, just actually taking that little bit of time just to either recoup or get some admin things done. And I really noticed the difference. So now I can move forwards into the week that's coming and know that if I have to go a little harder this week, then that's okay, because, you know, I've taken a little bit more time to recharge.
Love that. Well, I'm glad that you've been able to get some time back, because isn't time such a valuable commodity? So with that said, I think we can probably wrap this up so we can give our listeners some time back and they don't have to hear us continuing to waffle on any longer. Yeah. But no, in all seriousness, we do want to say a ridiculously massive thank you to everyone so far who has taken the time out to listen and to get in touch with us and share feedback. And it's obviously quite daunting for us, as we spoke about at the beginning of the episode, being super vulnerable. I've never been this vulnerable openly before with who knows who is listening. So really appreciate you approaching our conversations with gentleness and softness, and we hope that our waffle is making sense and you're taking something out of it, because we really appreciate it. And just a massive thanks.
Yeah, Megzy, totally agree with that sentiment. Really appreciate everyone tuning in. And again, as we've said before, we really want to bring you guys into these conversations, and we would love to know, what are the things that you're struggling with as it relates to your well-being or your self-esteem? And equally as importantly, what have you been doing that's actually been helping you? You know, whether it's something really scientific and medical based or something super woo-woo, we would love to hear from you so that we can also share anonymously, of course, with our community, because isn't it true that when we understand that other people are going through experiences similar to ours, that we feel less alone? So send us a DM, shoot us a message. We would absolutely love to hear from you.
Thanks. Bye.
Adios. The content discussed in this podcast is for informational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional mental health advice, diagnosis, or treatment. If any of the topics we covered today feel overwhelming, we recommend seeking individual support. If you or someone you know is experiencing a mental health crisis, please contact Lifeline on 131114 or 13 Yarn on 139276.